Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome, and thanks for joining us for this webinar and Q&A tonight, Sleep, Self-Care, and Sharing a Healthy, Productive Indoor Environment. My name is Laura Horn, and I'm the Chief Program Officer here at Active Minds, and it's my pleasure today to co-present this session with two experts in the field. We have Dr. Jennifer Hartstein and Dr. Kristen Lee. And before we get started, I just want to acknowledge, this is a wild time for all of us, but especially for students, knowing that many of you have been asked to leave your campus somewhat suddenly as we're looking to contain the coronavirus contagion. You're having to adjust to new environments, to transition to online learning. And we were just talking before the webinar, there's just this level of shock, on top of the uncertainty and the sadness that you all are likely feeling. And so we thought we would just provide this space, 1 hour tonight, to answer any questions that you have. I want to thank everyone who submitted questions in advance, and we're going to use those to kind of shape the content for the webinar, but we will hopefully have lots of time at the end to take questions from you all in the Q&A. So you might see in your controls, there's a spot for you in the chat room to enter in your own questions, and as they come up, please feel free to go ahead and start putting them there. And then as we have time, we'll be weaving those questions throughout the broadcast. If you're not familiar with Active Minds, we're a national nonprofit organization supporting mental health promotion and education for young adults. And Active Minds works with over 800 colleges, universities, and high schools now, providing programming and live events like this. And together with you all, we're creating hopefully communities of support where people can feel validated, supported with whatever they're struggling with around mental health, and hopefully saving lives together. So I thank you all for being a part of that movement with us and joining us tonight for this quick talk. My two guests today, as I said, are Dr. Jennifer Hartstein and Dr. Kristen Lee. I want to introduce them first. Dr. Jen is a nationally recognized child, adolescent, and family psychologist based in New York City. She's a frequent contributor on NBC's The Today Show and a core expert on the Dr. Oz Show. Dr. Jen is the author of Princess Recovery, a how-to guide to raise strong, empowered girls who can create their own happily ever afters. And she is a member of our board of directors, a much beloved member of our board, and we're really happy to have her tonight.
Thanks, Laura.
Dr. Kristen Lee is also with us. She's known as Dr. Chris. She's an internationally recognized award-winning behavioral science professor, clinician, and author from Boston. As the lead faculty for behavioral science at Northeastern University, her research and teaching interests include individual and organizational well-being and resilience, particularly for marginalized and underserved populations. She operates a clinical and consulting practice devoted to preventing and treating burnout, and is the author of Reset, Make the Most of Your Stress and Mentelligence, A New Psychology of Thinking. She's a regular contributor for Thrive Global, Psychology Today, and her work has been featured on NPR and CBS Radio. Thank you so much, Dr. Jen, Dr. Chris, for being with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. First, I hope you both are okay despite the circumstances we're in. I know you both must be swamped during this time, and we really appreciate you being here. Just briefly, I wanted to ask how you each are doing.
Go ahead, Dr. Chris, you can start.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Laura, and just everyone that's tuned in, and thank you for your question. And, I think it certainly is a somber time and very heartbreaking, but I also feel heartened by just seeing the acts of love and solidarity and courage and resilience that are happening as well. So it's certainly a time of a bit of shock and sense making, but also just a sense of hope and optimism that we can find our way through this together.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think being swamped is part of my normal routine. So in some ways, this feels very comforting to me. Like this is just what the norm is, but it's a different tone. And I think that's interesting, especially being in New York City, which was just kind of named the epicenter of what's going on, and the amount of anxiety that is coming from people around me, not just people I'm working with, but friends and family, and all of that is it's a lot to juggle. But I think we're going to be talking about self-care, and I think one of the things that I'm really spending the time focusing on is not only the resilience and the positivity that I'm seeing from other people, but what am I doing to take care of myself? And that is a huge priority for me in whatever way that I can. So I'm finding the balance. It's a new way to find it through, but we're finding it.
Mm-hmm.
How are you, Laura?
Oh man, you're going off script here.
Sorry.
No. I think, doing well despite the challenging circumstances, like everybody, trying to do my best. And at Active Minds, we've certainly seen an impact of COVID-19 personally, and on our programming. And so, it's a real honor to be here tonight. It's a real honor to be with the two of you and to be able to answer these questions that I know our students are really relying on us for. So thank you both so much. So I'm curious first to hear, what are you seeing and hearing from young adults right now during this crisis? And, if there was one key takeaway that you would have for students, what do you think is the most important thing for them to hear tonight?
I think I'm hearing so much just about adjustment. Like the word that I think I keep going back to for all of us. I think it's young adults. I think it's their parents. I think it's across the board is adjustment. How are we adjustment? What are we adjusting to? What do we need to be adjusting? And so the message I'm trying to give is, it'll all come. Like we all want it. We're instant gratifiers. We want it like that. Mm-hmm. And so my message is a lot of like, slow down, slow down, slow down. Mm. It's not working yet, but we're trying.
Yeah, I love that. I'm also seeing just, tremendous amount of anxiety and sort of like, how do I make sense of all this? And, like you said, just this monumental need for massive adjustment, like where so many of our coping strategies or ways of operating have shifted so dramatically. And I think, sort of that barrage of information we're getting and sort of like, do I panic? Do I not panic? I see a lot of that. I think it's just important to allow ourselves, to not rush to judgment on ourselves or our emotions right now, right? And so just allowing that full spectrum of emotions to arise and knowing that we as a species, as human beings, are very much wired for resilience. We're very capable of healing. And we're really fortunate because we do have a tremendous amount of resources that we can all leverage to take care of ourselves and to make our way through this. And so I just see sort of a lot of angst, but also a lot of just caution around don't get anxious about being anxious or stressed about being stressed, and realize that's very healthy. It's very normal given what's at hand and what we're trying to contend with being, just an epic thing that is a test of a lifetime, really.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's something very validating. I kind of go back to this too, that we're all in it together. I think there's something very validating that the anxiety is something we're all experiencing. It's not specific to one person. So I think that there's something validating and kind of positive in this community building, albeit scary, but community building experience.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's kind of an unprecedented time. So we're all kind of feeling what we're feeling in the moment, and there's no really wrong way to feel right now.
That's right.
Exactly.
One of the key questions or key themes that came up in the questions that we received from students was self-care, and that was mentioned. I want to take a second and launch a poll for our attendees to hear from them about which of the following self-care habits have been most challenging to maintain so far during COVID-19. We'll give everyone a chance to answer. I want to say it's all anonymous. Nothing that you share in these polls can be tied back to your contact information, so please know that, and select all that apply. And they're streaming in. We're going to give a second for everybody to have a chance to read through it. All right. Maybe 2 more seconds. All right, so I'm going to end the poll now and share the results with everybody. So if you can see that, one of the most challenging things has been maintaining a routine, which makes sense because we're all in new environments and having to adjust. And so having trouble figuring out how to translate all of those routines and coping mechanisms to our new environment. Getting enough physical activity, which also makes sense because many of us are being told to please stay inside as much as possible. What else kind of rises to the top? We have managing news and social media intake, and again, getting outdoors, which is really strongly connected with physical activity. So that makes a lot of sense. And thanks everybody for participating. There's going to be more polls. But with that, Dr. Chris and Dr. Jen wanted to ask, how important is self-care right now? And what are those key positive habits you would say we should most try to maintain?
I think self-care, I think for most of us right now has to almost be like the number one thing we need to be focusing on. I mean, our attention is split in multiple directions, right? We've got to attend to school, we've got to attend to the change, all these things, but self-care is what's going to get us through it. And it's interesting that people are having such a hard time with finding a routine, because that's to me at least, the most important part of self-care that's working for me, right? Is what can I rely on? Because we rely on routine. We crave structure. And so when our structure is like pulled from us, we have to figure out what that new routine is going to be. So for me, I think self-care starts with, what can my routine be? How can I figure out how to maintain it in the face of lots of things and the waves kind of hitting me? And then how do I follow through on it when I'm not necessarily held as accountable as I might be if I'm at school? Right? I think that's part of it. I think that's, to me, like the number one piece.
I love that. And I would just echo that. I think we should also kind of try to define self-care, because I think some of the popularized views of it are like mani-pedi or treat yourself or, like indulge. But when we think about the science of self-care, we think about it as being a deliberate attention to our mind, body, and soul through mindsets and behaviors and habits, right? And again, like you saw, both Jen and I were like taking a screenshot, like we love seeing that participation. It's the best. But really just to see like this universal struggle. And again, like structure is such a force in terms of protecting our well-being. And we're having to be very agile right now. I would just say, when we think again about the true science of self-care, that it's not touchy-feely, it's not kumbaya. I want to emphasize to everybody, it's not selfish or superficial. This is a mainstay, critical element of how you're going to stay resilient through this. And I think a lot of times, I bet lots of you on the call, you're leaders, or, maybe you have younger siblings or cousins, or you have different roles in your life where you feel like maybe it's even hard for you to kind of show up in a way where you're acknowledging your disruption, or you feel like you don't want to open up about that. But part of this is giving yourself permission to know, again, when those routines get disrupted, how do you pick those one or two things that are going to be anchors for you? And I think one thing we really want to emphasize in our discussion tonight is there's no one size fits all formula for this. Like what works for me might be different for you, or it might work for me one day and then not
the next
day. So just give yourselves that flexibility to discover what works well and to just try different things. Even if they seem small in light of something so big, they can actually make a tremendous difference.
Nice.
Agreed.
And Dr. Chris, you mentioned, choosing one or two things kind of being your anchors for the day that can help you feel some semblance of a routine, even when it's tough. Do you all have any other ideas for how a routine can be maintained during quarantine? I feel like this is one of the toughest questions on the list, and maybe you can only speak from personal experience, but, what do you think is most helpful in creating a structure?
I think one of the things that I think works for a lot of people is writing it down. When we kind of try and keep it in our head, it gets very muddled because emotions muddle everything and kind of make us see things all different ways. But write it down. Create a schedule that you write down. If you're living with other people, maybe have a kind of house meeting. It can be your family, it can be roommates, whatever. Hey, this is a schedule that I think is going to work for me. Is it going to interfere with, I need to use this at this time? Like, is it going to, so kind of make it a collaborative effort if you need to. But I think for me, writing things down is hugely important and hugely impactful, and I can rely on the consistency of that. I think doing the same, it might get boring, but doing the same thing every day, kind of keeping that structure as best you can every day so that it just becomes part of your new normal is also really important.
I love how you put that. And I think I'm also like, I have your laugh, I'll show you my, this is my daily planner journal. And one aspect that I use there is I write down my core desired feelings each day and kind of what I want as my intention for the day to focus on. And I think what's awesome about kind of modern brain science and just how we look at ways to build a good routine of self-care is aligning our values to our behavior. So what I mean by that is like, try to create incentives for yourself. Think about what you want to feel, what you want to experience in a day. And so like, let's say you want to feel a sense of increased energy, then maybe you're going to include a walk or a run, time in nature on your list to do. Or maybe if there's something you want to get done from a schoolwork perspective, maybe you create incentive around that in your day as well, to kind of help pull you along in that. But I think I agree, documenting it, writing it down, setting those intentions, and then again, just being a little flexible with yourself. Like, we're all used to this high octane way of living. I think this is just like we're screeching to this weird halt right now.
Yep.
But I think just recognizing that maybe you're not going to operate in full velocity like you had before all this struck. And right now that's okay. Like, you don't have to be a robot or a machine right now and just go, crank out 20 million things. Maybe this is a time of recalibration, learning more about what really works for you from a self-care and a health perspective. And then start to think about those routines in ways that are, again, more soul nourishing, that really just help you move along. And you're creating those spaces to cope and not just feel like you have to produce.
Right. I think that's awesome. And I would just add one thing kind of as a piggyback, which is, we know we can rely on change happening. And I liked it when you were talking about, it's like, it's not an on or an off, right? We're not either like all in or all out. And I think we need to remember that. And then I liken it sometimes as self-care is like the bumpers. Do you ever see little kids when they bowl and you put the bumpers on the side of the bowling alley, right?
I still use the bumpers. Come on.
All right, perfect. I haven't been bowling in a really long time. I might use them too, but I like that you don't have to like throw the ball and expect it to go in the gutter, right? What we're doing right now and all of this change and kind of allowing yourself flexibility is allowing yourself to stay within the bumpers of the bowling lane. And it doesn't, if it doesn't work, it just means you need to step back and try again. And I think that's really an important way to, I think about flexible thought sometimes, is that image of like the bowling alley and the bumpers I might bang back and forth, but I'm not like in the gutter and out.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to remember that that's not what's happening.
And sometimes it's part of the journey, learning, like Dr. Chris said, about what really works. You have to try a couple things.
Yeah. I love the bumper metaphor. And I think it's just that whole perspective taking about not panicking about feeling panicked or stressed about being stressed. It's like just giving yourself a little bit of space in this to recalibrate, to make sense of things and get your anchors down and find the way that really tether you the best.
Yes. Cool. I know, prioritizing your own well-being can be difficult, even in the best of circumstances, but now, many of our students are displaced and having to practice self-care while adjusting to the new environment. So we have a number of questions from students about how to navigate that new environment. And before we open up that discussion, I have another poll for folks. So let's see, get this
We
up.
like the poll.
Yeah, me too.
I'm like, what's it going to say?
All right. So this
like
one is
at the ready.
What's the most difficult part about sharing a productive, healthy environment with those you're living with? And there's quite a few options, so I'll give folks a chance to read them through. Again, you can select all that apply. And they're starting to stream in, so we'll give folks a second. All right, give it another 5 seconds. All right, so I'm going to end the poll now and share out the results. And if we look at it, it looks like the most difficult part right now is staying focused on school and work. And this is cut off, but staying focused on school and work despite the new environment and the distractions happening in the background. Also rising to the top are finding privacy and quiet space. We also have navigating just the small annoyances and inconveniences of living with people in close quarters. So Dr. Jen and Dr. Chris, how can we help create, another one? This is one, I think, for all of us, right? We're all still kind of learning this. How can we help create a productive and healthy working or living environment while quarantined with family members or roommates, knowing that a lot of it is just, finding time to focus, maybe setting some boundaries and finding privacy and quiet space.
Right. I'm laughing solely because, I live in New York City in an apartment with 2 dogs and a husband, and finding space is not always easy, right? Like, and I'm laughing too because I think of some of my clients who live in small spaces or using their bathrooms for sessions, or kind of they're being very creative in how they're finding space. So I think I would start with that. Creativity is huge. How do we kind of find the creativity to, like, what can you do? And if we talk about how we were talking about writing down routines before, it may be writing down a schedule of like who gets the private room for what amount of time. And I think it's going to require a lot of communication and a lot of being unafraid of asking for what you want. And I think we get stuck there. Hey, I really need this time. Can you please step up and help me? Or, hey, I really need this couple hours of quiet. Can you, whatever? And I think we're afraid sometimes that people are going to be annoyed or pissed off or irritated, and we don't know how to ask effectively. So I think communication, we've got to be creative and we've got to communicate. And I think if we can start with those two things, we might be able to get more balance in the way we need.
I love that. And I feel like it's hard because even that first poll was showing how hard it is to maintain a routine. And then it's hard to not be distracted by what's going on out there. And then in here, there's a lot of distractions too. And I feel like, Jen, I love how you put that. And it makes me think of the word self-advocacy, right? How do we advocate for ourselves? And again, I think that's such an important thing when we think about mental health in general, how we know what's helpful to us and how do we communicate effectively. One of my favorite strategies I've used in my therapy room and in my classroom and my work is what would mean a lot to you. So asking yourself that, and then even saying that to people you love and that you're living with, it would mean a lot to me if, we could set up a schedule, or if we could have a certain zone of quiet, or that we set up certain times where we talk about COVID, but other times when we don't go down that rabbit hole of full marination and the anxiety of it all. So it really does come down, again, like Jen said, to communication, self-advocacy, negotiation, and just again, I think when we're in an amplified time, I know for myself, I have a lived experience of anxiety and depression. And I know when I'm amplified, it's harder for me to be proactive and to advocate. And sometimes I might just brood or stew in my own emotions, or be afraid to ask for what I need, or maybe we can get kind of irritated and agitated and it doesn't come off the best way. And so I think in this time, realize that we all might be struggling with a little bit of self-awareness right now in terms of, and it's adjustment for every member of the family, whether roommates, family members, et cetera, it's a big adjustment for everybody. So it takes a little while to kind of work that out. But I think one way you might think about it is, when am I kind of in my best mode? Is it after a good run and I feel my endorphins are a little better, or after a good night's sleep? And how might I be able to communicate this to the people that are around me? Let's come up with a good negotiation. Let's have empathy for each other in this experience and see if we can kind of make it work. And I know there's no one size fits all. I think we all live with very incredibly different variables and challenges, but think of yourself as an advocate for yourself and think about what levers do you have to ask for what would mean a lot to you.
Right. I think I love that. And I also think the other thing that I was thinking about, what you're talking about, is when I was a kid, we used to have family meeting on Sunday. And so, and it was family dinner, a game, and what's going on this week, blah, blah, blah. So maybe there's a way to institute some of that, right? Of once a week, you have apartment meeting or house meeting or family meeting to just go over how are things going, what's working. I have friends that are both working from home, and they have a list of house rules on the wall, and one of the things on the list is headphones equals do not disturb, so that my headphones are on, I'm in my space, leave me alone. So what are the house rules? And we have to readjust those in a time that's uncertain, because we don't expect that this is what was going to be here. Everybody expected something else, and we're all dealing, to your point, Dr. Chris, of a lot of unresolved emotion, disappointment, frustration, sadness, anxiety, that's just fueling all of this. So I think, if you can have a house meeting to talk it through, it makes it so that we know that every Sunday we sit down and we have dinner and we have a house meeting, and we're not stewing forever. We can just put it on the table, literally and figuratively.
I love it. You're making me think of a meme that I heard about, and it was I think a student trying to be quiet for their parents, and it's super loud, and then the parent, it's that's late at night. In the morning, the parents don't think they're being the whole thing of we don't think our noises are loud.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just a matter of trying to have empathy, and then again, there might be misalignment in scheduling. So again, what would mean a lot to us, and how do we put into play a structured time to debrief it, where it's not going to be all guns a-blazing and everybody, mad at each other, but how could we have a productive conversation to try to come up with those common rules that'll be good for everybody's well-being in the long term, because we don't have a set end to this. So the more we can establish those ground rules and then acculturate ourselves to them, I think the better we all are. So I love that. Bring back the family meeting.
I know, right?
I agree. And I know, we have some older students who even have little kids that they're taking care of in addition to keeping their studies going. And one of the things I was going to share is I have 3 little children, and, both me and my partner are at home working on top of it, and having to negotiate that and say, okay, I'm going to have them in the morning, you're going to have them in the afternoon, actually helps me have a routine. It's not only can I have peace knowing that I'm going to have my time to do my work, and then I'm going to be able to let my partner do his work. And that really helps me feel good, on both sides of it. It really helps me feel comforted in having that structure and that routine that's kind of built in, negotiating that with a partner if you have someone at home who can help you out.
That's awesome.
But, some of our younger students on the other side of the spectrum, have mentioned that specifically in returning home and living with their parents again, some of them are having to negotiate or have these mental health conversations for the first time with their parents. Maybe they started using mental health services on campus, maybe started having symptoms, mental health issues while they're on campus, and now having to explain that to their parents maybe for the first time, and ask for what they need and explain to their parents, the full context of what is mental health and why is it important and all these things. And just wondering if on a basic level, if you all have any tips for students who might be navigating a mental health conversation with their parents for the first time.
That's a tough one. I mean, certainly you're kind of being forced to have a conversation that maybe you didn't want to have when you're having it, right? You want to be able to kind of do it on your own time and own terms. And because of the situations as they are, it might be happening faster or a little bit more out of your control. So one of the resources I would use is the resources you have on the Active Minds website, because you do have great ways to communicate and descriptions of different things. And so you can kind of have some fact-based things. Because I think a lot of times what I've noticed with being able to talk about mental health struggles is there's an invalidation that happens. It's like, but you were always so happy, or I don't understand what you mean. Like, and it's not meant to be invalidating. It's really, I mean, in the truest sense of the word, like ignorance. It's really, I see you through my lens, and what you're saying doesn't match with what my impression is of you. So I become invalidating. I may not be meaning to be. Some people might be invalidating, but in general, but I'm not meaning to be. And I'm questioning what you're saying. And I think to go to Dr. Chris's idea of self-advocacy, you've got to be in a good enough space to have that conversation, knowing that it's going to be challenging. I have had tough emotional conversations with my parents and kind of been like, we all know I'm going to cry. Like, this is just what I do. Like, I'm having a tough conversation with you. Ready? Let's just expect it. Moving on, and so I think you whatever style where I use humor a lot, that works for me, whatever works for you, but being able to get everybody's attention, phones away, no distractions, kind of information to support what you're saying if you feel you need it, and be ready for some invalidation and recognize like, but that might not be what the intention is, but there's confusion and misunderstanding, and we're trying to kind of ask for what we need with people who might not see us the way we see ourselves.
Yeah, that's really, really excellent points, Jen. And I think you're making me think a little bit of the Brene Brown empathy video.
Oh, I love that video.
That's a good one to show your family, perhaps. But it just really illustrates, I think, to your point around when is it safe for someone to hold space? Are they capable of that? Or might it be triggering or provocative for them? What might be the reasons that someone might react in an unhelpful way? And I think, again, there's not a one-size-fits-all formula, because everyone has very unique families of origin, like all of the different factors that are involved. And we know from like a sociological, psychological perspective, sometimes we're kind of cast in a certain way. Like maybe you feel the pressure to be the high functioner in your family or the overachiever, and they see you as very charismatic, and they might not, again, believe or recognize that you could be suffering behind the scenes. So I think just, helping foster, advocate for yourself around empathy is one thing. The other thing is trying to gauge your expectations. So think strategically about what help they might be able to provide and what might fall outside of the bounds of reality, like the realistic expectations. And in that, I would just encourage everyone that sometimes our families of origin do have limitations, And it doesn't mean that then, like we are doomed or that we're isolated or we can't find support. And that's where I think we continue to form what I call this in my writing, like surrogate families. So like, it could be like someone that's like a mom to you or like an aunt to you or like a brother or a sister, someone that you feel is a confidant. And what we know from the research on college students is that over time, increasingly college students are reporting less and confidence. So people that are mentors that they can go to, that they can trust, that they know will show empathy, that won't try to talk them out of it or say you're just overreacting or you're being dramatic. So it's important that if you don't have that immediately accessible, and even the self-advocacy has a limitation for you, to continue to reach out. Just because you're not in physical proximity with your professors, your college advisors, your counselors, your therapists, those that maybe you were already finding part of your dynamic circle of support, reach out to them now. You can still maintain those connections. And what I call maybe you might call it like your squad, but I call it like dynamic family, surrogate family, your circle, however you might want to frame that. But know that you try to get as far as you can with your family of origin and who you're living with. And when there's limitations, think innovatively about what else you can put into place to help, find people who hold space for you, that validate you and help you. Because sometimes they're just too subjective, or they might, again, just be in their own mode of anxiety, and it's really hard for them to really hold that space for you.
Awesome. There were 2 links shared by Dr. Jen, I believe. The Active Minds website, activeminds.org, and I put that into the chat for folks. And then Dr. Chris mentioned the Brene Brown video that's on YouTube. That's also now in the chat. So go check those out. One more question, and we'll go to the chat box. We're hearing from many students who say things like, I have all the time in the world to sleep, but I'm still feeling restless. Do you have any advice for students who are having trouble sleeping, knowing that that is such a core element of positive mental health, especially those students who may have anxiety?
Dr. Chris, you want to tackle that one first?
Yeah, so sleep hygiene is super important right now. And I think, again, when we're dealing with high levels of anxiety, it can be a vicious cycle of like sleep disruption and then that perpetuating the anxiety, because we know the more well rested our brains are, the more adaptive we can be, the higher our coping thresholds go. So, sleep is a critical element of self-care, of well-being. So I just a couple like 101 things, like try to get off your screen at least an hour before bed, meditation, deep breathing, yoga, hot baths, hot showers, essential oils, sensory things to really let yourself relish in those, to take them in, to just get your head clear. It might be reading or just quiet music, or maybe if you do want to watch something, maybe not too close up because of the lighting, but think about what's soothing to you. And then almost like you brush your teeth every night, right? It's like put those other mental health protocol things into that routine. And again, one thing we know from sleep is like if you can get your sleep cycle to be regulated, what time do you go to bed, what general time do you get up, and then exercising earlier in the morning, watching out for caffeine intake. Those can all, I know they're basic things, but sometimes it's easy to skip over them when we're overwhelmed. That can go a long way. Jen, I'm sure you have a whole bag of tricks too.
Well, you took a lot of them. Those were great ideas. I think, that there's a couple things to think about too, right? Stress is a bodily reaction. So we have to remember that, like, while worry or our thoughts kind of spinning out of control, stress is really kind of a somatic thing.
Yes.
So our body is going to feel tired and exhausted from all of the emotion and all of the change and all of this stuff. Yes. Even when we're not necessarily like needing to go to sleep, but we're going to feel fatigued, yes. Right? So I think our urge in those moments, at least I'll speak for myself, my urge in that moment is to go take a nap. Which the problem with that is I can take a nap and then I can't sleep at night because now I'm disrupting my sleep cycle. So we have to kind of check, like, it goes back in some ways to how am I managing the stress, right? What am I doing? Am I taking a bath? Am I taking a walk? Am I doing some meditation? Like, what am I doing to get myself in my body and decrease that stress? I think that's one thing we need to think about. I think we use our beds, especially as young people, for everything. when we need to kind of make our bed like this special sleep sanctuary. Like, don't do stressful things on your bed, because then your bed gets associated with stressful things. If you're like hating calculus and you're lying across your bed trying to do your calculus homework, your bed's going to be associated with calculus. That's not restful. I mean, I don't know how to do calculus, so let's not go there. But right, so we want to use our bed for sleep, and sleep and sex is really what you want to use your bed for, like nothing else. And I think to piggyback on just other sleep hygiene things, use a meditation app. Right, they have some wonderful meditation apps that help with your kind of quieting your mind and bringing you down into a space of getting to rest. Because the reason I think our brains turn on when we lay down is it's the first time we're quiet most of the time. So you get into bed and you're not distracted, so your brain turns on. So something that can kind of help you take those thoughts, put them over here. I often tell clients, like, if your worries are going, have a worry journal, write everything down, throw it in a drawer, and then go to bed.
Nice.
But whatever you could do to kind of like quiet it is helpful.
Love that.
Those are great tips. We have about 20 minutes left, so we're nearing the end, and time is going by very quickly. We're through my pre-questions, so wanted to have some more interaction with the audience and hear some of their questions. I'm going to pull up the Q&A and see what questions folks have. So the first one is, what's the best way to stay social and support the mental health of my friends while practicing social distancing?
So I hate the term social distancing. I think it's a fallacy. I don't think it should be what's used. Physical distancing is what we're doing. We're not social or emotional distancing. So here, for young people, we cannot just text. You actually have to pick up and dial the phone and call people. And if you don't want to do that, FaceTime them, Zoom, do something like this, create a Google Hangout, whatever. But I think for me, I mean, I'm certainly doing this with my friends, right? We pick a time. What time can everybody get on? Let's have, an hour together. Let's have a dance party. Let's whatever. But schedule it in. Put it as part of your routine. I have to call 3 people today, or I have to reach out to, not just texting, but like hearing their voices, seeing their faces. Texting is not the same, although I know that's how most of us communicate these days. It's just not the same as in real life communication. So take yourself there in whatever way you can.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Dr. Chris, to that?
I think that was well put. I definitely just want to echo the same sentiments around the term social distancing, ban that, physical distancing. The other thing I would say is I've seen, this is one of my favorite things I've been seeing, is just a lot of creativity around, hangouts on Zoom and just different ways of connecting. I would just emphasize quality over quantity. So there's a lot of different things coming up, and even you might have like work or school responsibilities where you're on the technology a lot. I would just, again, keep thinking about who is that dynamic inner circle? Who are your most trusted confidants? Who are the people that I call it like that hold reciprocal space, that you can trust to not be in extremes of panic or denial. So like someone that can, again, validate what your experiences are, but they're also trying to stay resilient, and you're brainstorming and ideating strategies of self-care and possibilities and positivity, and not in like a fake kind of contrived, we have to put a big happy smiley face on it, but just in a way where you can be real with each other. So people you can really be real with, and make sure that they make it on your schedule every day. And I think that really helps, is the quality of the interactions with people that are like that.
Great. Another question is, it's so hard to concentrate and study while feeling isolated. How can I work on focusing so that I hopefully keep my grades up?
Can you study via Zoom with a friend like you would if you were sitting in the library with them? I mean, you might sit in the library across the table from someone and not talk to them. So if you're on your computer, maybe you do the same thing, so that you're kind of on a screen on the side and you can look up and be like, oh my God, this passage was so stupid or whatever. But then you just can see somebody. And I think I was saying to someone today, like, what a blessing that this is happening while we have all of this technology that helps us stay connected, versus 15 or 20 years ago when we would not have had the technological infrastructure to support all of this. And I think that's like really, so use it. to Dr. Chris's point, like if you know you have study buddies, use them to study with.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that could be super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's thinking about what you would normally do on campus and getting really creative, like we were saying before, about kind of recreating that as best as we can using the technology available to us. Love that.
Instead of a virtual dance party, have a virtual study group.
Yeah.
Or whatever ways that work for you. I have a lot of high school students that I work with that do their homework with their friends on FaceTime. Even before this, they would do their homework with their friends on FaceTime.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Chris, anything else you'd add?
I just feel like the key word there is simulation. Try to simulate what you were doing before that you felt was protective for you. Try to reimagine that and simulate it in the best way that you can.
Okay, awesome. This goes back to some of the other themes we already discussed. Many studies say it's important to surround yourself with positive people. How do I interact with the people in my family without getting trapped in their negative vortex?
I'll take a crack at that.
Go for it. It's all you.
One way I've been thinking about it is to try to avoid being too porous. So picture like you're a sponge, right? And you have all these holes and it's easy just to suck everything in. We also, as people, can set boundaries to not be too porous to negative or toxic information or energies. And another way I could put that is try to guard against letting someone else's anxiety becoming your anxiety. And that's hard sometimes. So sometimes, again, that goes back to self-advocacy, communication, asking for what means a lot, what you need. But also sometimes we can help each other reframe things. So again, like a big thing that's happening right now is we're catastrophizing, like we're in this epic, horrendous situation. And it's easy to imagine the worst. And the news media helps us with that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
In our wild imaginations. And again, as I said, I'm a person with a lived experience of anxiety. So my wild imagination can get pretty wild and I can kind of jump to like the worst imaginable conclusions. So I think just in that, watching out for people that are catastrophizing and asking them, like, wait, is there a different way we could think about this? Or could we focus on what is versus what isn't? Or how else might we see this? What are some bright spots or things we could put our energy into? So it's redirecting and reframing and then setting boundaries that I think can be helpful. And it's not easy, but it takes a little time to renegotiate those kinds of trends and relationships.
Yeah, 100%. And I like the analogy of being, not as porous. And I like to think about it as, I'm not a Marvel or DC comic person so skilled, but like the character that used to in Fantastic Four that could make like the bubble around herself, like I kind of say that all the time, like Invisible Girl, like put the bubble around you so like nobody can get in. So a similar kind of idea. And I think similarly to that, we need to figure out how to be interpersonally effective and then also be ready for someone not to give us what we need. And then even if I am super skillful in how I ask for something, I still run the risk that, that person's going to keep the news on all the day, or I'm going to walk into the room and they're always going to be talking about COVID-19 and I just can't hear it anymore. So we have to recognize that as skillful as we may be, we still may not get what we want. And so then how do I take care of myself? So that may mean limiting some of the time I spend with my family or my roommates and finding my people, to your point, Dr. Chris, that I can connect with, right? So if being around my people means too much news in my house, I'm going to find my people online that I can goof around with or do, have a virtual happy hour with or do a Netflix watch with on a movie that I like, right? So I think we have to kind of think about how am I asking for what I want effectively and skillfully? If it doesn't work, do I ask again? Maybe. And then if it really doesn't work, what do I do for self-preservation and self-care? And I think that ultimately at the end of the day is what has to matter the most, is that like, I can't give all of myself to someone else. I have to take care of myself.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We probably have time for one more question. This one is a little bit unique. I'm curious to hear what you all will say. Some of our students are saying that they are finding themselves now living either by choice or by necessity from the circumstances with their romantic partners for the first time. And so they're asking, when we're all now working from home together, spending more time together with our partners than usual, I imagine this might create some challenges in how to allow each other space and alone time. what suggestions do you have for sheltering in place with your partner for the first time?
It's all one big experiment.
Well, can I just kind of normalize that I think many of us are sheltering in place with our partners for the first time, even if we've had a long-term relationship. So I certainly have never had to, kind of be New York on pause with my husband in my apartment. We tend to spend a lot of daytime, he works in Connecticut, I work in New York. We spend a lot of time not together. So we spend a lot of time together too, but like, this is very different for every relationship. So I want to normalize that this is new for all of us, but to the point of it being a new relationship versus an established relationship, right? Like, I know the habits. So although they might be exacerbated right now, I know what the habits are. So here we are, we're anxious, everything's uncertain. And now I'm in a new relationship in my house where I'm trying to figure out what that looks like too. It goes back to, I think there's a common theme across all of these questions, which is it really goes back to communication, self-advocacy, and self kind of preservation, right? If what you're doing doesn't work for me, how do we negotiate how to make it work for both of us? Mm-hmm. It can't be all or nothing. It can't be all one way or the other. I would add in another C, I guess, which is compromise, right? We're going to be working on compromise here. Who gets what and when? Laura, you talked about how like you guys are creating the schedule in the morning, and there's compromise in there, right? You might have to turn it upside down one day. So I think communication and compromise are really key, and kind of maintaining what you need and not kind of shrugging and whatevering and then feeling lousy about it, which breeds resentment and everything goes bad.
I love it. I think that was so comprehensive. And I like how earlier you talked about how you use humor, and like when we think about the protective factors within our relationships and just in terms of resilience, just even, humor or finding a creative activity that you both enjoy, but then creating boundaries and space to do your own thing as well. But I love how you put all that. I think that's really helpful.
Thanks. Awesome. Well, that is unfortunately all the time we have today. Active Minds is going to be offering more live content throughout the outbreak, including a webinar tomorrow on maintaining student-led mental health advocacy for our chapter members and other student leaders who are working on mental health advocacy around the country during quarantine and online. And we have one on Thursday on navigating communication challenges when living in close quarters, so building on some of the themes that we talked through today. So please join us later this week and check back at activeminds.org and follow us on social media to continue engaging with us and keeping up with all the live content that we're going to be coming up with in the next several weeks. We'd love to continue hearing your questions and serving your needs, so thank you for allowing us to do that. And thank you, Dr. Jen and Dr. Chris, for spending this hour with us. We are very grateful to you both. I think this was a really awesome discussion. Thank you for sharing your time. Especially when I know the critically important work that you all do for young adults every day and for others during this time. So thank you so much for your work.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, awesome. Take good care, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. To our attendees, thank you for joining us, and take care until next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.